So I was watching the Glenn Show at bloggingheads.tv, and this episode was entitled Corona Taboos, and he and his guests discussed the things that maybe we think we know or intuit about coronavirus, certain attitudes that people have or hold that they are not allowed to express. And they ran through a number of ones, and some of them might be the ones that you would expect. Certain economic versus what is compassionate? Is the disease worse than the cure? Does intervention cause more suffering than if we just let other people let things run its course and then herd immunity, etc., etc. That sort of trade-off. That's one of those taboos. But the other one that was interesting that this guy dropped was how people are being directed, and this is something that I've been learning about watching some of these videos, the nature of models and modeling, and how to create models from data and what their purposes are and what people's expectations of them are. Apparently, determining whether or not a model is good based on facts is not the purpose of a model. It's not supposed to be true or false, or the data that we use to generate it. You create some kind of expectation and then say, let's direct human forces this way, because assuming that this is true, and assuming that if this is true, this is what the world will look like in 2 weeks, let's plan on this. And then it turns out, well, that model was false, that model was wrong. And they go, well, no, that's not what the model's for. What is this? I can't get to the chicken. I can't get to the chicken. They chopped up the road. How dare they? I have to take a detour. I'm winging it. All right. It'll give me 2 more minutes to nail this down. They're talking about expert opinions and computer modeling. If you're a layperson, it gets very frustrating because you're supposed to listen to the experts, but also you're not supposed to be a sheeple, because if you're listening to the wrong experts, you are a sheeple. And then when you look into it, apparently you don't know how to read the data, and then everybody's going, well, you don't know how modeling works? You don't know how modeling works? So we're getting pulled in all different kinds of directions, and everybody thinks everybody is ignorant and wrong, and it can be exasperating if you're just on the ground watching this. But there is one thing specifically about the appeal to authority that is part of the listen to the experts claim. I'm just trying to get to my chicken right now. This is very distressing. I think I'll make it. I hope they're open. I don't even know if they're open. We'll find out shortly. They have a banner up. That's promising. So I'll get around to what I'm trying to talk about eventually. The appeal to expertise and we're going to transition into catastrophic modeling. So when people create these models and they're trying to direct human forces based on this, the data that we have, and this is what we think the world's going to look like, et cetera, some of the models that they create are like apocalyptic scenarios, and that's what they put on the table. And they're like, well, agree with this risk assessment and agree with this, otherwise you're not taking the issue seriously. And the area most notoriously that they do this is in climate science. So the people are, and apparently in epidemiology as well. Any situation where you can kind of catastrophize and sensationalize and be like, well, this very well could be the threat, and if you don't take this model seriously, then you don't take the situation seriously. And that's one hell of a bind to put people into, where they want to be reasonable, but they can't respond. And we also have a media, so I think it's just known that the media that we have thrives on fear. If you're not afraid about what's going on around you, they don't get the ratings. So that's why a lot of the stories that they have and the way that they frame them are constantly terrifying you. So knowing that aspect of the media, and also the fact that they're constantly criticizing and this is another thing, we have elected officials. We voted for those people. Most of these experts that we're supposed to be listening to aren't our elected officials. They are unelected bureaucrats that have been installed in these positions and sat there for, like, through multiple administrations. So I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but, just keep that in mind. We didn't vote for these folks, and they have the power to affect a lot of policies and change. And that in and of itself is concerning. But when you're talking about, well, listen to the experts, and they're using these catastrophic models, and also they occupy these stations of authority, and we can't fire them because we didn't elect them in the first place, it creates a certain kind of feeling. And then when you object to what they're saying, and you maybe question their credibility, it's a conspiracy, he's a conspiracy theorist, blah, 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 blah. So it's always this kind of all or nothing type thing where it's you're either with us or against us. You're going along with the story, and this is the plan that we have, or you're not. And it's hard to say exactly how to interpret things. So I'm sure there was something more particular I wanted to get at in that whole spiel, but I can't remember. And I am about 3 minutes away from getting some fried chicken. Sounds really good. Let's see. Models. Yeah, I just wanted to rib at the the climate change modeling. It was interesting watching two academics, people trained in the social sciences and a lot of these processes. Not particularly in epidemiology or the climate science, but they know some of the techniques and modeling and how that works. And they were talking about the taboos. And the look on Glenn Lowry's face when his guest was like, yeah, the catastrophic nature of the climate modeling really reflects the poor quality of the process. It's basically, and I'll tie in the psychological element because it gets confusing. Even when you're talking about appealing to expertise, it's like, well, which experts are you asking? Because if you're a common American person and you're being thrust these models and the projections, and it's based on these apocalyptic things. There's something in cognitive behavioral therapy, this is psychology, called cognitive distortions. And there's a number of cognitive distortions, and they are modes of thought that are not helpful, that lead to poor thinking and poor judgment. And one of those is explicitly catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is a cognitive distortion. And so when you are being told to listen to experts and they are appealing to your psychological vulnerabilities, now I'm not saying that's always happening in a case where somebody gives a bad projection and it looks like the outcome's going to be really bad. Sometimes that is the case. But if it's always the case and it's always respond to this or you're not part of the conversation, maybe there is a cognitive distortion in play, and maybe the expert that you're listening to is not the one creating the model. If that makes sense. But I'm going to get this chicken. Thanks for listening.